Start the morning right with a cup of Vinyl Tap. Nothing beats the refreshing taste of a hot, warm mug of Vinyl Tap. Enjoy your podcast in liquid form today. Vinyl Tap. Enjoy responsibly.
2, 1.
Vinyl Tap. I'm Tim.
I'm Tim.
And this week we listened to Changes by Justin Bieber, his 2020 outing. Was this a lockdown album? Who cares? What do you guys think of Changes by Justin Bieber in 2020? Do they know things? What do they know? Let's find out.
I think it would have been better had it been a lockdown album, to be honest.
Honestly, this album would have been better locked down, straight up. Like it's just not interesting at all.
Oh, behave.
What makes you say that?
What, that it was terrible and I hated it?
Yeah.
A lot of things,
Well, go on.
Many
then.
things.
If only we had a podcast in which to explore such ideas about music.
I know, right? Look, starting with trap and ending with trap. That's my whole argument, is that like the first 3/4 of this album is the same song. And it is so generically cookie cutter pop hit produced like nonsense. And then we get like what's equivalent of like an EP worth of music that sounds like the actual tracks that this album was meant to be. Like this kind of like acoustic exploration of, whatever fucking emotions Bieber was going through at the time. And they were like, well, to make this a pop hit and popular, we need to add like 13 tracks of fucking auto-tuned trap garbage. And that was my hot take on this album.
I have potentially a hot take on expounding on what you've just said. I don't think those end songs in isolation would be good. I think that they tricked you into thinking they were better than what they were by having the 10 trap songs first.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Maybe, but my inclination is to disagree. I actually think that those songs were not bad. I think that what was it that I was jamming out to? That's What Love Is. I thought it was a bop. I loved it.
What? Sorry, That's What Love Is, or Goodbye Yellow Brick Road by Elton John?
See, no. That's so uncharitable.
I see what you're saying, but I still feel like they were half-baked, and the sound design on them was pretty and the guitar tones were and there were things they could have done to make them really good, interesting songs.
Okay, so here's what I mean is those songs have really good songs in them.
Sure.
And they weren't ruined with the trap beat.
Because there was no trap beat.
Because some of the other songs in the album also had good songs in them.
Yeah.
But then... And that's the album.
Yeah. Yeah.
I also honestly think that, I'm not going to say all because some of the features were Jesus Christ, but there are a couple of features that I think were potentially the strongest parts of the album.
No.
Not at all.
No.
Wait,
I want to hear what you think was a good feature.
Kelhani.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Get me.
I could hardly even pay attention to that through how bad the song was.
It was such a nice tonal shift that we hadn't had throughout the album, and I really liked, I think, her voice, right?
Okay, but what I'm going to posit here is that her voice was so remarkable because it was actually the only change we had in how many songs at that point?
Songs?
Literally 11 songs. It was the first time there was something different.
No, they had not really tonal shifts, but there were some tonal shifts, and they had a fuck ton of textural shifts going on throughout those first songs, and those textural shifts did nothing. And
Yes.
you know that like I'm all about texture being able to like carry if it's done well, and it was so just like, oh, we should change something here. We should change something here. Oh, let's take the trap beat out and take the bass beat out, and then we'll put it back in, and then we'll take it out. And there was
It's kind of
nothing,
color
like,
by numbers. There's no real artistry to the textural variations.
there was no like, we're gonna put it in at this moment to emphasize this or make this part feel bigger or this part feel smaller. It just felt very, we'll try and do that to make it interesting, because I'm sure they were aware that it was the same thing like across those songs, but then within those songs as well. Like, I don't have in my mind like song that had a verse chorus that was like distinct enough, like across those first, like you said, 10 or so songs. The only moment that happened in those first songs was in Come Around Me, the outro shift into that really dark and moody sort of sound it had. I was like, oh, this is interesting, but it was 3 bars of an outro and didn't do anything. I was like, oh, well, that sucks, because that would have been really cool.
The beginning of the album and the very end of the album were the most interesting things about the whole thing.
They were
and it's
promising,
literally just,
weren't they?
yeah, because they had like, well, like you say, literally promised. They had like introduced some concepts that I thought were maybe going to get explored. Some kind of, you know, cool sort of like spatial, ambient sort of like textures that I thought were like cool. Like, we're going to have some kind of, I don't know, emotional exploration. And it just didn't happen until the end of the album. But the problem with the end of the album is, like, lyrically, we got that exploration of, you know, anything, literally anything. But musically, we got this nice change with like the acoustic guitar sound. But then again, once that sound happened, it never developed further. It just sat there and exactly the same thing it introduced.
So, for some context here, Justin Bieber hadn't released an album in 5 years. He'd been like, this was coming for a long time, and this is what they gave us. And it's like, Justin Bieber has a great voice. Justin Bieber, I'm pretty sure, can write good songs. At least the team that works with him writes good songs, and then they fuck with them. They do shit to them.
Have you heard his latest album?
I haven't listened to what's its
Justice, isn't
Justice.
it?
Yeah, that's how would I describe it? It's like as if this album delivered. It has variation. The songs are interesting. The lyrics are actually interesting. Like, it feels like they kind of reacted to this being a hot, steamy pile of nothing that you can just ignore. And they were like, oh, fuck, we should actually write music.
I feel like for most of his career, Justin Bieber has kind of been on the coattails of a genre. He's been like, he joined like pop at that peak, hyper, like, flossy production when he was a kid, and then his life went nuts and he stepped back for a bit, and he came back, and now in 2020 hip-hop R&B elements in pop is like the new thing. Everyone's using trap beats, so he makes this album, and then at the end they let him put some songs that he wanted to put on.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely the vibe that I got from it. Was
I
that
agree with what you're saying.
Well, what's the other half then?
yeah, sorry, go on, Jason.
I mean, the part that I disagree with is that like hip hop and R&B has been in pop since around the time that he came to prevalence. Like, remembering that Usher brought him, into pop music. I agree with pretty much everything else. So not necessarily about. I mean, I don't know who's making the decisions, but it feels like the first half was them trying to cash in on trends and not actually write music to be good music, but try to like write music that is going to.
Well, yeah, that's what I was saying.
Yeah, and that's why I'm saying I half agree with you. I disagree about like, not that they haven't tried to add trap beats and stuff in here, but I think there's those elements that you're saying minus trap beats have been there since like the early 2010s.
I don't know.
They haven't been
early
there
2010s,
so...
pop was dominated by like fucking Taylor, mostly Taylor. Like rap elements weren't so much in pop as far as I'm aware in like the early 2010s. Katy Perry wasn't rapping.
No, I mean, not in terms of like the actual artists themselves trying to do it, but having like a guest person in for like a bridge.
Right, like Ludacris on Baby.
Yeah, and that's more what I'm getting at. Those elements were there back then.
Yeah, but it wasn't
kind of shifted so that the...
Oh, sorry. Go on.
Lockdown.
Lockdown. Woo!
Yeah, I know that it's kind of shifted and that now it's more likely the artist will try doing something themselves. Like, I think from memory, even Ed Sheeran has tried to like half rap on some of his songs.
As we all know, Taylor Swift famously rapped once.
Yeah. And that would not have happened, 12 years ago.
Yes.
But having, like I said, having like a rap bridge or alternate section to break up the song has always, not always, but like since the like late noughties has been a thing.
Tell me what you thought of Post Malone, Jason. Post Malone is technically on this album.
And that's what you mean, technically. I could have...
I mean, he appears on the album.
Yeah. I don't think he adds much, but then again, he's in one of those songs that's just like blends in with everything else. And
yeah.
The sound that those first 10 songs are going for are very much in line with something that Post Malone would write, but lacking any of the substance or intrigue that he can put into his songs.
I agree.
So,
however, I think
I wanna...
Forever kind of stands out. I thought his voice suited this really, really well.
Yeah.
And so did Clever, who I hadn't heard before. He has this really interesting voice. And I thought that Justin Bieber was the weakest performer on the track, which is always fun. And I thought, man, this was one of those songs that I thought could be a really good song. But it's not.
I like that it had a bit of a darker tone compared to the ones before it.
And it had toms instead of the hi-hat sizzling away constantly. And that was a breath of fresh air, I guess.
Mm. So I want to take issue with Tim saying that who is it has an interesting voice? That Clever has an interesting voice. Because arguing that they have a vocal tone that is theirs, I think that's a hot debatable topic. Because how can you say that you have like an interesting voice or vocal tone when your vocal tone is auto-tune or is Melodyne? Like, so many of these rappers who...
You're going to tell me you can't... I mean, if you haven't listened to it, I guess you might not be able to. Most of them don't have the exact same sound. There are, like...
I know, but they are like, so basically the same kind of robotic, kind of Melodyne, auto-tuned thing. And, like, yes, I get that there is, like... You can clearly hear that it's someone's voice being put through the effects.
He had this wavery southern twang to his voice
this?
that really showed up against Bieber's SoCal Canadian blend and whatever the hell Post Malone's supposed to sound like.
A genre that I'm pretty
Mumble
sure
rap.
You don't listen to a lot of would be country, like American country. They all sing with that like very thick accent, even if it's not like their natural speaking voice.
Especially if it's not.
Because it's part of the genre, and there's going to be distinctions there. But for someone who's not familiar with those voices, it's going to sound very samey.
No, but
it doesn't mean that there's not distinctions and there's not intrigue.
Yeah, but
if
like the
it's,
fact
like,
that it's
a
so heavily
stylistic part of the
auto-tuned.
genre.
But it's
Do you have an issue with auto-tune as a concept?
I have an
Do it.
I have an issue with like your whole singing, like you've based your entire vocal quality by like having to use an auto-tune effect, by like tuning everything that you do.
No.
Like, you know, singing a song and
So-
like, oh, you've got like an interesting voice. Like your voice is, and
Do you
your
know-
vocal tone depends on the software that is tuning your voice. And if you got rid of that, sure, like you
not
would still
entirely.
have the accent and you'd still have the inflection and it would still sound like your voice, but it's not musically, you know.
So,
Like-
everyone knows T-Pain. Everyone here knows T-Pain. Beebs, you know T-Pain.
Yeah,
we met
yeah.
once.
Have you heard T-Pain sing without auto-tune? Like, the most famous person for using auto-tune on their voice. Like, used it way more than anyone currently does today. Like, it was so
This isn't going to
effective.
prove your point, Jason. It's not. Because
You don't reckon?
No, because he's a very talented musician.
That is my
but
point.
Habibi's saying that the auto-tune culture is cultivating musicians who aren't good at that. Who
Well,
can't...
I'm not. Yeah, like I'm not necessarily arguing that they can't be good musicians. It's just that like if you establish like if
No, I didn't say that.
yeah, well like
I think Justin Bieber
okay.
is a really good singer, and I also think that they used way too much tuning on him.
Oh, that
in
was
this
something I
album.
was going to get to as well. But before we move on, Beebs, when you play violin, do you only play acoustic violin? Do you put any reverb on? Do you put any distortion on? Do you use effects to make the sound you want for the instrument that you're using?
sure, yes, I do.
Then it's no different to doing it to a voice
No,
which
no,
is
it
also
is
just
different.
No, no, it
It
is.
is different because if I say, "Hey, I have a signature violin sound that is my sound that I create," right?
through
And
the
that
use of effects.
No. See, this is the thing, is that it's not sold as through the use of effects. It's, their vocal, that's how they sound. Like, that's how they sound when they sing. But it's not. They've produced it.
I don't know if anyone's
And
under
they've-
the false delusion that that's how that person
I was going
actually
to say,
sounds.
I don't think that, anyone who sang on this would be saying, oh, yeah. If
I
that
think
was
that,
100% the case, totally with you. I'm not for guising something as this is my natural voice when it's been auto-tuned, but there is so much auto-tune on there that...
And everyone knows.
Like, people would know.
But I don't think that people realize that, like, someone's voice gets like that through the use of auto-tune. Like, I don't think that the average person would know that.
We'll have to interview the footpath. We'll have to
Yeah.
take it to the streets. And like I see what you're
Yeah.
saying, Beebs. I've worked with children a lot, and a lot of them like they mimic. Let's say, for example, Dance Monkey. That everyone knows Tones and I like with that voice. They always mimic that voice. They're trying to recreate what it sounds like on the recording, and that's
Yeah.
impossible.
Yes, and this is kind of what I'm getting at, is that like there are so many artists who their sound is the auto-tune. They're not using auto-tune to like get something. Like if you
T-Pain
took
is
the
using autotune to create something interesting. T-Pain uses it as an effect because it is an effect.
Yeah, I would argue that. Whereas I feel like there are a lot of artists who like autotune is the sound that has made them who they are. And if you got rid of that, they couldn't sing the melodies, or they, you know, like these melodies are put over the top and you can clearly tell that they're just mumble rapping and they're just singing on the
So-
same note because the autotune is pulling the sound so far that like it's losing any kind of human quality to it.
So you have an issue with autotune as a crutch,
Somewhat, yeah.
as a pillar of your vocal production.
Yeah. I would say that.
All right.
and it bothers me that
Anyway, I
it's-
think clever sounds
anyway.
kind of interesting. And,
I am in pretty firm opposition that this is something we should come back to. And
we'll
not
come back to you
continue
later
down this
in
rabbit
another
hole.
episode of Vinyl Tap.
Because, that we could go on about this for a very long time.
Justin Bieber's
While we're speaking
auto-tuning.
about-
Jason,
Okay, while we're
take the
there,
floor.
yeah. Justin Bieber's auto-tuning, like from the very get-go in All Around Me, where it was like a little bit sparse and you didn't have the like super like sub bass there and the trap beats hadn't come in yet, you could just hear
it was so strong.
the melodyne or the auto-tune on the vocals. And like Tim said, it's so just like almost jarring, because you know that he can sing, and for
I
them
just
have
wanted
had
to hear
do
his
it-
voice. Let me hear his voice. He has a good voice.
And on that, when we get into that later part of the album where they do have interesting songs per se compared to the trap beats, when they've got, electric guitars and acoustic guitars, when before we get to them, because I have some shit to say about them, same thing. Like, which one is it? There's one that's like I think it's Changes, that was mostly just like, I think an acoustic guitar, or it might have been an electric guitar, and his voice. And instead of it drawing you in and being intimate because you had these acoustic-y sounding instruments and natural sounding voice, the overproduction on it creates this barrier where he's singing about this like intimate thing where he's like, I'm still changing, but I might not change. And instead of being drawn in and feeling any emotion that he's expressing, there's this like sugar-coated barrier that's glossing it up that you just can't get into. And those like intimate songs where they're really stripped back was like such a nice relief after the thick clusterfuck that was the first beginning part of the album. But just the production, they kept the like super clean trap beat production through the end half, and I really wish they hadn't. Like,
Yep.
Because like Tim was saying, there was some interesting stuff going on, but I just couldn't move past that like candy wrapping that they'd put on it.
I think I could forgive it because it fit with the album, and I think, how do I put it? It was like, I think it would be really jarring to get a acoustic rendition that was, vulnerable and expressive. Even if it was just an EP, knowing that it has this huge production team, and how the whole thing was sort of set up, it would sort of feel a bit strange to not have the candy wrapping, because at the end of the day, these songs were pop songs. They weren't kind of like a country Taylor Swift, I'm gonna try something a little bit different here. I think what Justin Bieber is presenting with these last few songs are kind of emotional pop songs. And so personally, I reckon candy wrapping was okay. But I do see where you're coming from with your problems with it.
I disagree, because you can have something that's really well produced to pop standards without over auto-tuning the voice, without having terrible guitar tones. Like the guitar tone that he had on If the You Can Go and Love Yourself, I think that's what it's called.
Right, yeah.
The guitar tone, and that's pretty cool. It's you can vibe out to that, and that as a song, like his vocals are affected in that song, but it's not to the point where they're so glossy that you can't feel or have any inflection as to like the emotion that he's trying to get across. Whereas this was so like overproduced that it like almost needed to go the other way in towards the hyperpop realm of like it's intentionally that way, but it wasn't that far, like pushed that far enough, like pushed in that direction enough either. Like it was in that like uncanny valley middle ground of not intentionally overly produced, but not stripped back enough to like suit what the song needed if it wanted to be genuine.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you didn't like the album?
Conflicted. There's potential within it, but I dislike the way that it's been presented.
Is there potential in Yummy?
Oh no, that is a song is straight up just cancelled.
It sure does go for 3.5 minutes.
And that's the lead single. It was the lead single of this album.
That honestly doesn't surprise me because,
here's my journey with Yummy. I'd heard it in the past, obviously. I think because you made me, Jason, you fuckwit. And I hated it, obviously. It was one of the worst things I've ever heard. And then when I came to it in this album, in this listening, it wasn't as bad. I was like, oh, okay, here we go with Yummy. And then it just came along and moved past it, and it was fine. And I thought, wow, that means that the context of the songs around it has made Yummy palatable. So the first half of this album is that bad.
Yeah. Okay.
And
that's
the
fair
second,
enough.
well, the last third, I guess, of the album is full of songs that I think, if recorded on a different album, could have been good to great.
Click to find out what else we've listened to this month.
Click below to support the artist we just listened to.
And don't forget to like and subscribe.